It's my great pleasure to be with all of you here today. Father Nicholas Sheehy from the Legionaries of Christ, the new assistant chaplain here at the Duke Catholic Center, and my great joy to celebrate this Mass with all of you. Looking at today's Gospel, I think it's really powerful. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been reading the Gospel of John, chapter 6, the Bread of Life discourse. And today something happens that I think that can resonate with all of us. Because Jesus has this tremendous miracle, takes a few loaves, a few fishes, and multiplies this so that they're able to feed 5,000 people. And then, after the miracle is done, the Jews begin murmuring. And what is that? It's an expression of doubt. So you have his apostles who stay true, but everybody else walks away. And for me, it's one of the most powerful testimonies of the Eucharist, because this is what happens. In the other three Gospels, we see the explicit institution of the Eucharist at the Last Supper. But in the Gospel of John, we don't have that later on when he's describing the Last Supper, and he dedicates 4, 5, 6 chapters to the Last Supper, but he doesn't talk about the institution of the Eucharist. And why is that? Well, because he already does that here in chapter 6, very clear. And it's so clear that the vast majority of his listeners walk away. And Jesus doesn't say, stop. Jesus doesn't say, wait, you didn't quite understand. No, he's very clear. I am the bread come down from heaven. And I think that we can feel sorry for these people who walk away, who experience this doubt, and this doubt grabs hold of their hearts. And this is something that each one of us might experience in different moments of our own spiritual life. Something that always strikes me helping people in spiritual direction is precisely that problem of doubt. I can think of one young woman that, she was really exemplary in so many ways. Graduate student, very busy, but then also giving a lot of room to her faith. So daily Mass, frequent confession, even several hours a week going to Eucharistic adoration. And nevertheless, one of her great problems was that doubt in her heart. And it was something that she would struggle with, and something that she would bring to spiritual direction, and something that she would wrestle with on her own. And so that simple experience of doubt is something that we all have. But what do we do when we doubt? I think that's the question that each one of us has to answer. Sometimes we can even be in Eucharistic adoration, and that was the experience of this young woman, Katerina, where she would be there in front of the Blessed Sacrament, but then asking herself, is this all fake? Is this even real? Am I crazy? Jesus, if you're here, why am I the only one here? So we can have these different experiences of doubt. And I remember, my own journey as well, having to struggle with that, even during times of adoration. You're there, and it's like, okay, either this is real or I'm absolutely nuts. And I think that's an experience we might all make sometimes. That charge that the devil can sow into our heart of thinking, well, this is simply ridiculous. And it's something that's deceivingly powerful. We see today's gospel that the Jews, the other listeners, murmured about Jesus. They had come, they were interested in this teacher, seemed like somebody who was preaching, in a very good way, similar to the rabbis, but there was something different. They wanted to get to know him. But then when he talks to them about this tremendous mystery, you're going to have to eat my flesh and drink my blood, they just whisper to each other, like, this can't be. They're not able to accept that. I am the living bread that comes down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. But I think at the same time, we all experience doubt. So what can we do? And I think there's basically, where I would like to propose 3 steps in order to overcome doubt. And first, we have to learn to discern. Something I think is important, whenever we're facing some temptation, is to look, where might this come from? What room might be I giving to this? We can think about what we're reading, we can be thinking about the conversations that we're having, that maybe we introduce some of that doubt from the outside. I remember a few years ago, I was reading Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, and he makes some powerful arguments. And he's a very intelligent man. And, even though at the end, I wasn't going to accept his arguments, but I did notice that it had an effect on my own heart, that it was introducing the seeds of doubt. And so whenever we're experiencing that doubt, we have to discern, well, where might this be coming from? And what can I do? And something that I always suggest, if we do, perhaps because of professional reasons or because of our studies, we might be reading things that are, contrary to the faith or that are aggressive against the faith, or simply because of our own curiosity, we're exploring these different avenues. But we need to kind of make sure that we have a counterbalance there. So if I'm going to read Richard Dawkins, well, I need to also read Jacques Philippe or Pope Francis, or somebody who's going to give me a little bit of spiritual meat that allows me to sustain my faith in those moments of difficulty. What does the Catechism of the Catholic Church say about doubt? Voluntary doubt about the faith disregards or refuses to hold as true what God has revealed and the Church proposes for belief. Involuntary doubt refers to hesitation in believing, difficulty in overcoming objections connected with the faith, or also anxiety aroused by its obscurity. If deliberately cultivated, doubt can lead to spiritual blindness. All right, so that's the first thing we have to see. Is this a temptation to doubt? Am I just, feeling this difficulty? This doesn't seem quite right. Or is it something that I'm doing actively? And the Catechism even, distinguishes there. So that first step is to discern, where might this be coming from? And am I giving myself enough good spiritual reading, time in front of Jesus, going to the Mass, going to confession? Am I giving myself that spiritual nourishment that I need? Then the second step, to deliberate. So after discerning, to deliberate. And I have the different arguments, and I can kind of argue them out in my own head and see what makes more sense. Something that for me is always very helpful when I'm tempted to think that I know better than the church. I see on the one hand, Jesus Christ, Peter, Augustine, Aquinas, Newman, so many great thinkers and writers over the course of 2,000 years. And on the other hand, me. So if there's a disagreement, who might be right? So far, they've always won. St. John Henry Newman preached that our faith is assailed by various doubts and difficulties in order to prove its sincerity. So even that experience of doubt, which can be very painful, and speaking with so many people in spiritual direction, and then also my own experience, it is painful. It's hard, but we have to really weigh the different arguments. Don't be superficial when you're facing doubt. And then finally, decide. Also, discern, deliberate, decide. At some point, you have to act. We can't just be wondering forever. We have to decide and we have to act. We can't stay forever in a state of indecision. After discerning the motions of the Holy Spirit and deliberating the merits of the various points, the various arguments, the time comes for decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to believe or am I not going to believe? Am I going to follow Christ in his church or am I going to walk away? And I think that it can be a very fruitful experience and very much lead to that sincerity of heart that St. John Henry Newman mentions, where we face doubt. We don't have simply an unexamined faith that's never been tested, but we have a faith that has carried us and allowed us to experience and to go through so many different things in our own life. We can know that we have made a good choice and rest in that security, that we're with Christ. And even some moments where it may be more difficult, but there to go back to the words of the gospel and to hear Christ, I am the bread come down from heaven. And we can know, well, whatever difficulties we might be going through, we want to be with Christ. We want to receive this heavenly bread from heaven, which is what we prepare ourselves for during every celebration of the Eucharist. Also just wanted to share something. So the American bishops, Archbishop Broglio, the president of the United States Bishops Conference, put out a statement this week, and he invited us to pray for peace in the Holy Land. This week, there's a Jewish celebration that they celebrate every year, praying after the kind of the anniversary of the destruction of the temple. And so it's a time, for them, obviously, especially significant now. And for us as Christians, I think we could be praying for peace and for all people involved in the conflict. And really that this land where Jesus walked